Final Fantasy III isn't the first video game you'd think of when you think of great villains, or even the first Final Fantasy you'd think of for that matter. And I'm definitely not here to try and convince you otherwise. The game was clearly developed with gameplay in mind first, and the story, while not terrible, is primarily there as a vessel to provide the gameplay. As such, the main villain is underdeveloped, has minimal presence throughout the game, and is immediately replaced out of nowhere at the last second by another character who also gets next to no development. But despite that, I think that Xande's character does tackle one particularly interesting concept to me, and that justifies making this video his own mortality. And then, while we're here, I may as well take a brief look at Cloud of Darkness, since Xande can be covered fairly quickly. Now, you may have to forgive me a little bit. Final Fantasy III's storytelling isn't very fleshed out, and there aren't any complete transcripts out there, so I'm going to be spending less time on the exact events of the game than usual, and there may be a couple small details that are either incorrect or missing, but it shouldn't affect my major talking points. And honestly, the exact events of Final Fantasy III are far from the more interesting points of this video. 1,000 years before the game begins, there was a great magus named Noah who had 3 disciples, Doga, Une, and Xande, and he decided to bestow upon each of them a gift. Doga was given magic, Une the dream world, and Xande mortality. Xande did not like this, and devised a plan to cover the world in darkness in order to halt time and stave off his death. Xande set up base in Syracuse Tower, or Crystal Tower, a monument made out of solid light long ago, and used its light against the world to take control over the earth and water crystals, using their power to bring the world into darkness, assigning Titan to guard the earth crystal and Kraken to guard the water crystal. The remaining 2 crystals were located on the floating continent, which was created by Owen, who had been researching levitating technologies. Owen was able to identify the flood of light and placed his son Desh in cryostasis to be awakened when the reactor keeping the continent afloat was in danger. The flooding of light caused so much imbalance between light and darkness that it caused the Cloud of Darkness to manifest to try and return the world to the void. It identified Xande as a useful pawn and began to manipulate him from behind the shadows. 1,000 years later, the Cloud of Darkness and Xande identified the floating continent as a threat and caused the earthquake from the opening scene of the game. They tried to seal the remaining 2 crystals, and they also sent Medusa to the Tower of Owen to destroy the reactor keeping the continent afloat. Most of the actual events of the game aren't particularly relevant to Xande, so I'm just going to be quickly skipping through most of it and just touching on the important parts. The earthquake reveals the wind crystal within the altar cave, which grants the 4 Warriors of Light their first blessing from the crystals. The Warriors of Light meet Desh at Dragon's Peak, but he's suffered amnesia due to sleeping too long and cannot remember his duty to repair the Tower of Owen. He tags along with them, and together they eventually journey to the Tower of Owen and defeat Medusa. Desh then remembers who he is and what his task was and stays behind, sacrificing himself to ensure the floating continent remains floating. After defeating Hein and saving the Elder Tree, the Warriors of Light learn about the surface world and obtain an airship capable of taking them out there. On the surface world, they defeat Kraken and recover the power of the water crystal, restoring light to the surface world and removing the stasis it had been placed under. Soon after, they meet Doga and Une, who explain to them about Xande's past and help prepare them to face him. Doga prepares the key to Eureka, where ultimate power can be found, and Une prepares the key to the Crystal Tower so that they can approach and confront Xande. But immense amounts of energy are needed to power the keys, so Doga and Une will have to sacrifice their bodies in order to supply enough energy. At the top of the tower, the Warrior of Lights come across a trap laid by Xande in the form of a mirror that afflicts anyone who gazes into it with the curse of the 5 worms. Doga's spirit tracks down our various allies from our journey, including Desh, who did manage to survive the intense heat of the reactor, and with their help, the Warriors of Light are able to break free from the curse and continue forwards to finally confront Xande, in his only physical appearance in the game. Xande tells them that the darkness is almost upon the world and that they are too late, but decides to dispose of them anyways to ensure they couldn't ruin his plans for immortality. The Warriors of Light defeat him, and he says his death won't change anything because the Cloud of Darkness is already here. Xande's actions had disrupted the balance of light and darkness in the world. 1,000 years ago, when the cloud first manifested, it was because light had begun to flood the world from the Crystal Tower. The Warriors of Darkness had managed to restore the balance and seal it away, but not before it began to manipulate Xande's thoughts. This time, the darkness was overpowering the light, and with the two out of balance again, the cloud was able to manifest once more. It effortlessly slaughters the Warriors of Light before retreating to the world of darkness. Doga and Une sacrifice their souls in order to revive the Warriors of Light to allow them to pursue the cloud. They track down the 4 dark crystals, defeating the guardian of each one, and recruit the help of the Warriors of Darkness from 1,000 years ago to weaken both the cloud's offense and defense. And with the cloud of darkness now vulnerable, they're able to defeat it and save the world from being returned to the void. Warning, in this next section I'm going to be stating a lot of things that are assumptions rather than fact, but it would quickly become incredibly arduous to listen to if I pointed it out every single time. So, whenever I talk about Xande's or Noah's intentions, just know that it's from my own analysis rather than something concrete that the game has provided. As I've said a few times, Final Fantasy III's storytelling and characters, even with the additions in the 3D version, aren't particularly well explored. But as I've mentioned in a couple other videos like my Albedo and Claire Obscure villain analyses, the philosophy of immortality is something incredibly interesting to me. And even though the concept isn't explored to quite the degree it could have been in Final Fantasy III, it's still a different enough take on the concept, with Xande losing immortality rather than gaining it, that I still think it's worth talking about. Every living being will die. That's just a fact of life. Some creatures may have significantly longer lifespans than others, but eventually they will all meet their demise just the same. So, naturally, as mortals, it's common to desire a longer lifespan, as the fear of no longer existing in this world can be quite powerful. More time spent with our loved ones, the ability to experience more things in general, than more time just straight up being alive. But what many of us haven't yet experienced is what happens once we've decided that we're done with living and are fine with passing on. I imagine that virtually, if not every single person watching this video is too young to have had a moment like that, and that to me is what makes Xande's story somewhat interesting. It's easy to imagine how life would be affected going from mortal to immortal, but the reverse is much more difficult for most of us. We never get any flashbacks to Noah's time, nor do Doga, Une, or Xande really expand on what Noah was like or what his intentions were. But from the way they do talk, I think it's fair to assume that Noah truly thought that mortality was the best gift he could come up with for Xande. It freed him from the burdens that came with living forever, and check out the immortality section in my Albedo video for more on that discussion. But despite this, Xande's outrage is also completely understandable. If you look at it from his perspective, it's easy to see why he felt shafted, especially compared to Doga and Une. Doga was gifted magical powers beyond his wildest dreams, Une complete control over the dream world and the ability to communicate via dreams, and Xande was basically told, "You're gonna fucking die." Xande hadn't yet reached the point where immortality felt like a curse, so to have it suddenly stripped away obviously felt like a punishment. The fear of death is a very human one, and Xande is facing it for the first time ever. And while he's dealing with his own newfound existential dread, he looks at his comrades Doga and Une and sees them and their shiny new toys. And so he lashes out at the world, plunging the world into darkness in the NES version or freezing time in the 3D version. And just as a quick side note, I like the 3D version of his story a bit more since it adds a purpose to his actions in preserving his immortality rather than just acting out of spite. But all of this raises the question, why did Noah grant his gifts like this? In some cut dialogue for the 3D version, Une mentions how she felt that Xande got the greatest gift of all, but obviously this caused him to crash out and plunge the world into darkness or freeze time. And one question that I've seen come up a few times is, did Noah not see this coming? Seems like Noah would have been better off giving Doga or Une the gift, then. I mean, a gift does no good if it pisses someone off to the level that Xande got pissed off. And this line of thinking makes sense at a first glance. If Noah had exactly these 3 gifts at his disposal and had to disperse them amongst his 3 students, then perhaps Doga or Une would have had the better temperament to receive them. and Xande would have been better off with one of the gifts that they had received. But this probably wasn't Noah's intention. We don't know exactly how Xande acted beforehand, but I think it's logical to infer that he had difficulties appreciating the more fleeting moments of life. When you're immortal and have the opportunity to do everything, then nothing has meaning anymore. Small moments like appreciating a sunset or reading a book, or even larger moments like spending time with a loved one, lose their novelty when you can experience them forever. Noah was probably trying to look out for Xande. He wanted him to be able to appreciate these small moments and essentially forced him into a situation where he'd be able to. But Xande couldn't focus on the lesson in front of him, instead panicking about his upcoming demise. He became insecure in his now fleeting existence and couldn't handle the thought of leaving this world behind. And rather than attempt to understand Noah's gift and lesson, he crashed out and took the greatest action of all. Time compression. Wait, no. I mean, in practice, kind of, I guess. If time can't flow, then he can't die. So, I understand why Xande acted out in the way that he did, but with some assumptions, I can also understand why Noah tried to provide him with this gift. Doga and Une were each given shiny new toys with immense power, and Xande was told to appreciate the toys that he already had to play with. If you have 3 children and try pulling the same shit, you're gonna be on the receiving end of the worst temper tantrum you've ever seen. And in his mind, Xande was that 3rd child. He couldn't find his own meaning in life other than its duration, and his nihilism took over, seeking to return to his state of immortality rather than find some tangible meaning in his life. In hindsight, it's easy to say that Noah made the wrong decision, but he wasn't an omnipotent god. He was a teacher trying to look out for his students. He wanted his students to flourish in the best way he knew how, and was apparently willing to take the risk on what it might do to Xande's psyche. And unfortunately, freeing Xande from the shackles of immortality just so happened to lead to catastrophic consequences. This is going to be a relatively short section, as we don't even get a motivation for Cloud of Darkness. It seeks to return the world to the void and has been manipulating Xande in order to achieve this goal, but to what end is it trying to do this? I searched high and low, but I couldn't really find anything within the confines of Final Fantasy III. The FF14 incarnation seems to have taken over most of the Google results, and any FF3 discussions about it are just talking about the fight and its difficulty. So there isn't really much analysis that I can do on the Cloud of Darkness, but there is one thing that I feel I can talk about. The light and dark of Final Fantasy III's world seems to act as a loose stand-in for Yin and Yang. Now, I'm not going to fully dive into them as a concept. That would probably be better suited for a game that has some stronger symbolism to relate to. From my research, there is no one specific thing that Yin and Yang are. They are concepts that have various interpretations. They always seem to be counterparts to each other, but also each is necessary for the other to exist. We're all familiar with this symbol, I'm sure, the black representing Yin and the white representing Yang. The heads of each force constantly encroach on each other, forming a never-ending spiral with the two forces in balance. And within each of Yin and Yang, there's a small seed of the other, indicating that the two forces don't replace each other, but rather become each other. And when these forces are out of balance, then disasters may occur. The Tishan earthquake of 780 BCE is the earliest recorded earthquake in China that we know about, and on screen is a translated quote from Bo Yongfu on it. He implies that the earthquake happened because the balance of Yin and Yang was thrown off. Yang was being suppressed below, and Yin was overwhelming it from above. He also implies that this imbalance was a direct result of human intervention in the natural order. The energies of heaven and earth should not be in disorder. If they are disrupted, it must be due to someone causing the disruption. And these earthquakes were severe enough to threaten the Zhao dynasty. In Final Fantasy III, both light and dark have to exist in harmony, or else the world will come to a catastrophic end. Twice the Cloud of Darkness is manifested to attempt to return the world to the void, 1,000 years ago when light was overwhelming the dark, and now when dark was overwhelming the light. This imbalance was directly caused by Xande, who used the light of Crystal Tower to flood the world with light, and then drained the energy of the water and earth crystals to plunge it into darkness. The mysticism of Final Fantasy III's world isn't really dove into, so it's hard to say whether the Cloud of Darkness is a god or a natural force that's simply kept at bay when light and dark are in balance, but the world seems to exist on a knife's edge between light and dark, and for one reason or another, leaning too far in either direction will cause this malevolent force to manifest and drag it back to the void. And to further reinforce the harmony between the two, it's only when the forces of light and dark unite that the Cloud of Darkness is able to finally be defeated. The Warriors of Dark were only able to seal away the Cloud of Darkness 1,000 years ago, and the Warriors of Light are no match for it on their own. Its defenses are impenetrable and we're unable to damage it, and its attacks are unrelenting and we're unable to defend against them. But the Warriors of Light search the world of darkness and awaken the Warriors of Darkness to aid them, and receive the blessings of the Dark Crystals to match their blessing from the Light Crystals. And with the forces of Light and Dark united, we're finally able to pierce the Cloud of Darkness's defenses and withstand its assault, putting an end to it for good. Hopefully. To sum it all up, these villains kind of came at an unfortunate time and in an unfortunate game. Storytelling in video games was very much in its infancy, and the early odd-numbered Final Fantasy games were very much gameplay-focused rather than story-focused, and so neither Xande nor Cloud of Darkness got the development they needed to be good or great characters. I love some of the concepts that the game tackles, particularly with regards to Xande, but the execution falls a little bit flat, especially compared to more modern games. I feel like if the game was written today rather than 1990, the existentialism would have been significantly expanded, and perhaps Xande would feel like a much more complete character. I'm not sure I can say the same about Cloud of Darkness. I can think of more than a few examples of Final Fantasy villains in the game since then that were introduced later in the game and feel somewhat lackluster compared to the initial villain. But I imagine its existence would be at least a bit more justified. Do I think the game needs a modern-style remake, revamping the story into something that justifies itself a lot more? Not really. It already has one major remake, and honestly, I don't think this game really justifies another. Plus, I really don't think the internet is ready for another round of remake discourse. People are already annoying enough about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia apparently tried to expand on his character a bit more, but this game sadly doesn't exist anymore, and the archival of the game's lore doesn't seem to be the greatest, so I decided to just focus on the original Final Fantasy III. It at least had one or two things for me to extract some interesting talking points on.